Season 2, Chapter 1. The Forgotten Rise. The morning sun over Colorado Springs did little to cut through the smoke and ash that drifted like a shroud across the city. It should have been a beautiful morning. The Front Range was visible in the distance, snow-capped peaks catching the early light, the sky painted in soft hues of gold and blue. But the light felt wrong, muted, strained, as though the sun itself hesitated to look upon what had happened during the night. The Civic Center Plaza, once a proud symbol of order and civic unity, lay in ruin. Stone statues that had stood for over a century were toppled and broken, their marble faces shattered beyond recognition. Glass from surrounding buildings glittered across the pavement like frost. Burned-out vehicles lay twisted and abandoned, their skeletal frames still radiating heat. The air smelled of ozone, scorched earth, and something older, something that had not lingered in this world for centuries. Daniel Mercer stood atop a crumpled lamppost, its base torn from the concrete like a snapped bone. From there, he could see everything. Emergency responders moved frantically through the wreckage, their radios crackling with overlapping reports. Civilians stumbled through the debris in shock, some bleeding, others clutching children or loved ones, their faces blank with disbelief. Police officers tried to establish perimeters that dissolved as quickly as they were formed. This wasn't just a disaster, it was an awakening. Mercer's chest still throbbed from the surge of power he had channeled the night before. Every breath felt like it scraped against something raw inside him, as if his body hadn't fully accepted what it had become, or what it now carried. He flexed his fingers. Beneath his skin, faint but unmistakable, the seal pulsed. Not like a heartbeat, like something listening. It was restless, awake, resonating with lingering echoes that hadn't yet faded from the city. The Forgotten's presence still clung to the streets, to the stone, to the air itself, like a vibration just below the threshold of hearing. Everywhere Mercer looked, he saw the consequences. Civilians running, officers scrambling, and the supernatural allies he had come to trust. Vampires, werewolves, warlocks, either nursing injuries or scanning rooftops and alleyways for movement that shouldn't exist. No one spoke above a murmur. The city felt as though it were holding its breath. This is only the beginning. The voice cut through Mercer's thoughts like a blade. He turned as Elena emerged from the rubble near the shattered steps of City Hall. Her crimson coat was torn at the hem, the fabric singed in places, darkened with soot and blood. Despite the damage, she moved with effortless grace, boots crunching softly against broken glass. Her fangs glinted briefly in the pale sunlight as she spoke. Her expression was calm, too calm, almost serene, but her eyes, ancient, sharp, calculating, never stopped moving, scanning the streets, the skyline, the spaces between shadows. They weren't testing us anymore, Elena continued, her voice steady but edged with something cold. Last night was not a probe. It was a declaration. Mercer frowned. A declaration of what? That the terms have changed, she replied. They're here to take what they were promised centuries ago. Rashad padded forward beside her, his massive werewolf frame leaving deep impressions in the cracked pavement with every step. His fur was singed along one flank, the scent of burned hair still clinging to him. Dried blood streaked his claws, some his own, most not. They're coordinating, he growled, voice low and vibrating with restrained fury. This wasn't random destruction, not chaos. He gestured with his muzzle toward the ruined plaza. This was positioning, pressure, testing response times. Mercer's jaw tightened. Strategy, Rashad finished. Planning, intent. Mercer looked back out over the city. Then we need to know who they are. Why now? And why they're after me? He spoke the words aloud, his voice harsher than he intended. Then we need answers. Real ones. Who are they? Why now? And why do they keep circling me like I'm the axis this all turns on? Silence stretched for a moment. Then a voice spoke from the shadow beneath a collapsed overpass. The Forgotten, Lucian Arkwright said. He stepped forward, long coat untouched by soot or ash, his presence oddly untouched by the destruction around him. His eyes reflected the city, not as it was, but as it had been, and as it might yet become. They were never meant to return. Lucian's words carried weight far beyond their volume. Mercer turned fully to face him. "Start talking." Lucian nodded once, then looked past them. Beyond the ruined plaza, beyond the city, as if peering through layers of time. "The Forgotten predate everything you think you know," he said calmly. "Older than vampire covens. Older than werewolf bloodlines. Older even than the first recorded human rituals." Elena's expression hardened. "Careful, Lucian. Legends are one thing, but these," she gestured to the destruction, "are real." Lucian met her gaze without flinching. "So are they." He drew a slow breath. "They were not created by humans," he continued, "nor born of any supernatural union recorded in contemporary lore. They are not demons, not angels, not gods." "Then what are they?" Mercer asked. "The first sentinels," Lucian replied. "Ancient custodians of balance between worlds, between monsters and mortals." As he spoke, the air around them seemed to shift, as though the world itself leaned in to listen. "Millennia ago," Lucian said, "before vampire dynasties carved kingdoms in shadow, before werewolf packs claimed forests and mountains, the Forgotten walked openly among early civilizations. They were humanoid, at least at first, but infused with raw, chaotic energy drawn directly from the planet." Rashad's ears twitched. "Living ley lines." "Precisely," Lucian nodded. "Neither fully mortal nor fully supernatural. They were intermediaries." Elena folded her arms. "And their purpose?" Lucian's gaze sharpened. "To maintain equilibrium, to ensure no species, human, vampire, werewolf, or otherwise, rose to dominance so absolute it threatened extinction." Mercer felt the seal stir, reacting to the words like a tuning fork struck against truth. Lucian continued. "When the first vampire dynasties arose, the Forgotten observed. When the earliest werewolf packs formed, they observed. They allowed growth, conflict, evolution, but only to a point," Mercer said quietly. Lucian nodded. "Only to a point. When Blood Kings began claiming entire regions," Lucian went on, "when supernatural hierarchies solidified into empires, the Forgotten intervened." Elena's lips tightened. "And how did they intervene?" "Subtly," Lucian replied. "Natural disasters that erased tyrants. Plagues that weakened overextended covens. Leaders who vanished without explanation." Mercer exhaled slowly. "Course correction." "Yes," Lucian said. "Correction, not annihilation." Rashad's claws flexed. "So what changed?" Lucian's expression darkened. "Humans." The word landed heavily between them. "The Hunters," Lucian clarified. "An order formed with the stated goal of monitoring and suppressing supernatural activity." Elena scoffed softly. "They never monitored. They controlled." "Exactly," Lucian said. "Their rigid hierarchy, their obsession with containment and dominance. It warped the energy the Forgotten maintained." Mercer's mind raced. "So the Forgotten confronted them." Lucian hesitated. "Yes," he said slowly. "And that confrontation nearly ended everything." The scene he described unfolded in Mercer's mind as if the seal itself supplied the images. Hunters armed with enchanted weapons. Blood-inked rituals etched into stone. Crystals humming with ley line energy. "They found the Forgotten's weaknesses," Lucian said. "One by one they captured them, sealed them, shattered them." Rashad snarled. "Impossible." "Not impossible," Lucian corrected. "Just costly." He went on. "Some Forgotten were bound in chains of silver and obsidian beneath mountains. Others were encased in crystalline prisons deep within forests. And a few, rumored to be the strongest, were imprisoned in void spaces between dimensions." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "Places humans could never reach. Places they believed were eternal," Lucian said. Mercer felt cold. "And the warning?" he asked. Lucian looked at him directly. "They said that if balance was ever irreparably broken, they would return." A heavy silence followed. Then Elena spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "And now they have." Lucian nodded. "Vaelric knew," he added. "He listened for centuries, studied every fragment, every failed containment, every prophecy." Mercer clenched his fists. "So this isn't about revenge?" "No," Lucian said. It's about correction. And we're standing in the middle of it, Rashad growled. The scream of tires cut through the air. Mercer's cruiser screeched down Colorado Avenue as the radio erupted with overlapping reports. All units. Multiple sightings of unidentified entities. Extreme physical capability confirmed. Civilians trapped, repeat, civilians trapped at 5th and Main. Evacuate immediately. Mercer slammed the brakes, the vehicle fishtailing to a stop. Hollins, he barked into the radio. Hold your position. Do not engage directly. You hear me? Do not engage. Behind him, chaos exploded. A group of Forgotten emerged from the smoke, humanoid yet distorted, their movements eerily synchronized. One of them reached down, fingers curling around a sedan, and lifted it as if it weighed nothing. It hurled the car into a storefront. Metal screamed. Glass detonated. Daniel! Elena shouted, already moving. She vaulted from the cruiser's roof and landed in a crouch, eyes glowing crimson as she tracked the Forgotten's movements. They're herding civilians toward the river. Mercer felt the seal pulse violently, resonating with every terrified heartbeat around him. Civilians scattered, screaming. His mind raced. The seal could influence the Forgotten, nudge them, slow them, but not stop them outright. Rashad roared and leaped into the fray. He collided with a cluster of Forgotten, claws shredding metal and concrete. He sent 2 of them flying into nearby buildings, which shuddered under the impact. Daniel! Lucian shouted, tracing glowing sigils into the pavement. Each symbol flared, slowing the creature's advance. This isn't just an attack. They're testing you. I know, Mercer yelled. He sprinted forward, moving faster than should have been possible. He intercepted a Forgotten mid-stride, grabbed it, and hurled it through a collapsed storefront. The creature reformed instantly, but it hesitated. They know you're the lockbearer, Elena hissed. They're not attacking blindly. They're evaluating, Mercer said through clenched teeth, calculating. Then I'll show them exactly why they shouldn't underestimate me. 3. Strategic retreat. Mercer knew the truth even as the seal surged within him. The city could not survive this. Not like this. Pull civilians to the tunnels, he shouted. Pre-established routes. Move. Elena nodded instantly, vanishing into motion. Rashad roared, driving back the Forgotten with brute force. Lucian traced wards in the air, shimmering barriers buying precious seconds. They'll break through, Elena called. Then we don't let them take lives, Mercer replied grimly. Everything else is secondary. As the Forgotten pressed closer, Mercer planted his feet. The seal flared, and the city held its breath. Far below the ruined mountains, in a chamber carved from obsidian and bone, Valeric watched the world fracture. The scrying orb hovered above a pedestal of fused skulls and black iron, its surface rippling like liquid glass. Within it, Colorado Springs burned. Streets split. Shadows moved where light should not exist. And at the center of it all, Daniel Mercer. Valeric's fingers traced the edge of the orb, feeling the vibration of the ley lines through the crystal. His armies, vampires bred for obedience, humans corrupted by blood rites and promises of power, had been shattered in hours. What remained of them fled into tunnels and ruins, broken and terrified. He felt no anger at their loss. They had been tools. The Forgotten, however, they were something else entirely. They move as they always did, Valeric murmured, his voice echoing softly through the cavern. Not for conquest, not for dominion, for correction. The orb shifted, showing Mercer standing amid smoke and fire, the seal beneath his skin glowing faintly even through layers of flesh and cloth. Forgotten shapes hovered at the edges of the frame, some attacking blindly, others simply watching him, heads tilted in unnatural synchrony. Valeric's eyes gleamed. The lockbearer reacts well, he said softly, exactly as expected. Behind him, the chamber stirred. Hooded figures, acolytes bound to him by blood and oath, stood in a semicircle, heads bowed. Their faces were hidden, but Valeric felt their unease ripple through the room. His restraint is admirable, Valeric continued, voice calm, almost reverent. He protects. He hesitates. He calculates outcomes instead of embracing inevitability. He smiled. But restraint is a luxury afforded only to those who are not standing at the center of the equation. He lifted his hand, extending it toward a vast stone table etched with glowing ley lines that spanned the continent. The map pulsed faintly, veins of power flowing through mountains, cities, fault lines, and oceans. At key intersections sat black crystals, each one humming with imprisoned force. Phase 2, Veilric whispered. The crystals pulsed in response. The Forgotten may be wild, he said, but they are calculable. They respond to imbalance the way fire responds to air. Predictable, unavoidable. He closed his fingers slightly, and one of the ley intersections, Colorado Springs, burned brighter. And Mercer, Veilric continued, eyes never leaving the orb, will be forced to choose. He always is. A hooded acolyte stepped forward, her voice hesitant. My lord, the Forgotten Prime. Veilric finally turned. Even in shadow, his smile was unmistakable. You fear it, he said. Yes, she admitted. All records suggest its release accelerates collapse. Balance, he interrupted gently, is not stability. Balance is tension, pressure, opposing forces locked in mutual restraint. He turned back to the orb. And pressure, he said softly, reveals truth. The acolyte swallowed. You wish to unleash it now? Veilric's smile widened, but there was patience in it. Calculation. Not yet. He watched Mercer pull a wounded civilian from rubble, shield them with his own body as a Forgotten passed overhead without striking. Watched him shout orders, coordinate evacuations, refuse to abandon the city even as it bled. The Lockbearer must see it first, Veilric said. Let him feel the weight of their power. Let him understand the cost of balance unrestrained. His hand clenched slowly into a fist. And then, he said quietly, we test his allegiance. Back in the city, Mercer felt the shift before he saw it. It wasn't a sound or a sight. It was a pressure change, like the atmosphere itself tightening around his chest. The seal beneath his skin pulsed once, twice, then steadied into a low, constant thrum. They're changing, he said under his breath. Elena turned sharply, crimson eyes flaring. How? Mercer scanned the street. Smoke curled around collapsed storefronts. Sirens wailed in the distance, abruptly cut short one by one. Above them, silhouettes moved against the clouds, Forgotten gliding without wings, without effort. They're not moving randomly anymore, Mercer said. Some still are, but others. He pointed. Across the intersection, a Forgotten stood motionless atop a shattered traffic light. It didn't attack, didn't advance. Its fractured, luminous face was turned directly toward Mercer. Watching, Lucian's expression darkened as he followed Mercer's gaze. Observers, he said quietly. Scouts. Rashad bared his teeth. Predators. No, Mercer said. Judges. The word hung in the air, heavy and wrong. Lucian exhaled slowly. They're not mindless constructs. They have memory, intent, purpose. Elena's voice was sharp. Purpose to do what? Cleanse us? Mercer didn't answer immediately. The seal flared faintly as thousands of human heartbeats registered at once. Panic, pain, hope, fear. Vampires hidden in shadows. Werewolves moving through alleys. Supernatural and human lives intertwined so tightly that separating them would tear the city apart. They're the first, Mercer said finally, his voice low. Before packs, before covens, before hunters. He looked up at the watching Forgotten. And they won't stop, he continued, until balance is restored. Elena's jaw tightened. At what cost? Mercer met her gaze. That, he said quietly, is what they're waiting to see. By nightfall, Colorado Springs no longer resembled a city. It was a war zone. Fires burned unchecked in pockets of devastation, painting the clouds orange and red. Entire blocks lay dark and silent, power grids shredded by impossible forces. The streets were fractured, asphalt peeled back as if the earth itself had tried to escape. The Forgotten moved through it all with terrifying coordination. Some struck infrastructure, bridges, substations, tunnels, cutting the city into isolated fragments. Others targeted locations steeped in hunter history. Old safe houses disguised as clinics, sealed archives beneath libraries, forgotten chapels warded with ancient runes. And always, some watched Mercer. Left flank collapsing, Lucian shouted, his voice strained as he carved sigils into the air. Each glowing rune slammed into a forgotten, slowing it just enough for civilians to escape. Mercer sprinted across broken pavement, the seal pushing his body beyond human limits. He caught a falling streetlight mid-collapse, hurling it aside as Elena dragged a family into cover. "They're hurting us," Elena shouted, forcing us into narrower zones. Rashad slammed into a cluster of forgotten, his roar shaking windows loose from nearby buildings. "They want pressure," he snarled. "They want mistakes." A forgotten lunged from above. "Daniel!" Elena screamed. Mercer twisted, catching the creature by its shoulder mid-air. The impact cracked concrete beneath his feet as he slammed it into a fire hydrant. Water exploded upward in a geyser. For a split second, the Forgotten's form destabilized. Then it reformed. But this time, its fractured eyes locked onto Mercer's, and it did not attack, tilted its head, studying. "They're learning," Lucian yelled as another Forgotten adapted mid-spell, shifting its density to slip through a binding ward. "Every pattern, every reaction. You're teaching them." Mercer backed away slowly, heart pounding. "Then we changed the lesson." Rashad skidded to a stop beside him, blood dripping from his claws. "You're holding back," the Werewolf King growled. "I can feel it." Mercer didn't deny it. "If I unleash the seal fully," he said, "I don't know what breaks first, me, them, or the city." Elena stepped closer, voice urgent but steady. "Daniel, listen to me. You are not alone in this. You don't carry the balance by yourself." Mercer looked at her, then at Rashad, then at Lucian, ancient, powerful beings who had chosen to stand with him. And beyond them, humans, terrified, fragile, trusting. He clenched his fists as the seal surged. "This is only the first wave," Mercer said, the realization settling like ice in his veins. "Veilric set this in motion. The Forgotten are just the beginning." Lucian's eyes widened slightly. "Then this isn't a battle." "No," Mercer said grimly as another wave of Forgotten descended from the smoke. "It's a reckoning." And somewhere far beneath the earth, Veilric smiled, because the war he had waited centuries to begin was no longer hidden. It had arrived. Season 2, Chapter 2. Judgment in the Sky. The Forgotten did not come for cities first. That was the first mistake humanity made in trying to understand them. Cities were symbols. Dense knots of life, noise, chaos, and pride. Cities were loud declarations of presence, monuments to human persistence. If the Forgotten had wished to terrify the world, they would have burned skylines, shattered bridges, torn monuments from the earth and let them fall like broken teeth. But terror was not their purpose. Correction was. They came instead for the lie. For centuries, the Hunter Directorate had believed itself the unseen hand behind the curtain, the silent custodians of balance, the last defense standing between humanity and the monsters that stalked the dark edges of the world. They erased bloodlines from records, buried massacres beneath natural disaster reports, and burned entire histories so thoroughly that even the supernatural forgot pieces of itself. They told themselves secrecy was mercy. They told themselves control was balance. They were wrong. The Forgotten remembered the moment balance was broken. They remembered the sound of chains closing around beings who were never meant to be bound. They remembered the screams that never reached history books. They remembered the Watchers turning away, satisfied that order had been enforced. And now, after centuries of silence, they had come to correct it. The bunker was never meant to feel small. When it was constructed, buried deep beneath layers of reinforced concrete and bedrock east of Colorado Springs, it had been designed to withstand nuclear fallout, orbital strikes, and supernatural incursions. Cold War paranoia and occult pragmatism had fused in its architecture. Steel corridors lined with sigil-etched plating, server rooms humming with encrypted archives, sanctified chambers layered with wards older than the United States itself. It had always felt invulnerable. Tonight, it felt like a coffin. The last remnants of the Hunter Directorate gathered in the Central Operations Chamber in near silence. No banners hung from the walls. No sigils marked allegiance. The old symbols had been stripped away after too many of them failed. Burned out by powers the Hunters could no longer explain or predict. Only function remained. Steel walls, hardened glass, rows of monitors flickering with live feeds, tactical maps, biometric readouts, and red warning indicators that refused to stop multiplying. Commander Miriam Hale stood at the center of the chamber, hands braced against the steel table as if anchoring herself to reality. Her hair, once meticulously pulled back, hung loose around her face. Dark circles carved hollows beneath her eyes. She had not slept in nearly 48 hours. She was no longer issuing commands with authority. She was reacting. "Bring up the Pueblo feed again," she said, her voice flat. An analyst hesitated. "Ma'am, we've already." "Bring it up," Hale snapped. The screen flickered. The image stabilized. What had once been a fortified convoy, armored transports, warded vehicles, personnel trained specifically to hunt creatures that could tear tanks apart, was now nothing more than twisted metal scattered across the desert highway. Vehicles lay crushed inward, as if squeezed by invisible hands. The asphalt beneath them had cracked and folded. The earth itself warped into unnatural ridges. Bodies lay where they had fallen, not torn, not burned, simply broken. Another screen showed a different location. A Hunter archive near Cannon City, one of the oldest repositories of confiscated relics and sealed artifacts in the western United States. The feed showed the ground collapsing inward, the structure sinking as though swallowed by a massive sinkhole. No explosion, no shockwave, just disappearance. "They didn't breach the perimeter," an analyst whispered, eyes wide. "The wards didn't even trigger." "They didn't need to," another muttered. "It's like the earth obeyed them." Hale straightened slowly. "No," she said, "that's not possible." A third screen came online unbidden, overriding lower priority feeds. A black site chapel, its existence officially denied, was shown mid-collapse. Stone walls disintegrated into pale dust. Sanctified symbols flared briefly before shattering like glass. "Commander," a technician said quietly, "we're losing sites faster than we can catalog them. They're not attacking randomly," another analyst said, voice shaking despite himself. "They're targeting us, our facilities, our history, every place where we intervened." Hale's jaw tightened. She clenched her fists until her knuckles whitened. "They're myth," she snapped. "The forgotten are a cautionary construct. A story we used to scare initiates. Weapons don't do this. Not human ones. Not supernatural ones." The words sounded hollow even to her. The lights flickered. Once, twice. The hum of the servers deepened, dropping to a subsonic vibration that pressed against the eardrums. Several people winced, hands flying to their ears. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, instantly. Breath fogged in the air. Frost crawled across the edges of consoles and screens. The smell of ozone mixed with something older, stone and rain and static. A sound rolled through the bunker. Not an explosion, not an alarm. A heartbeat, deep, slow, ancient. It reverberated through bone and steel alike. Boom, boom, boom. Cracks spiderwebbed across the reinforced walls. Someone screamed. Concrete peeled outward as reality itself bent, folding like wet paper. A section of wall simply stepped aside as if allowing a presence through. They emerged. The forgotten. They were tall, easily 8 feet, their proportions wrong in subtle, unsettling ways. Pale forms that seemed carved rather than grown. Their faces were smooth, featureless planes of stone-like flesh, split by glowing fractures that pulsed softly with white-blue light. Their eyes burned like dying stars. No mouths moved, no sound carried through the air, and yet you shattered the balance. The words formed inside every mind simultaneously, heavy with judgment. You imprisoned the wardens. You named yourselves judges. Hale's hand moved on instinct, drawing her sidearm. The forgotten turned toward her. They did not hurry. They did not threaten. They simply advanced. The bunker imploded. Daniel Mercer was halfway across the street when the world lurched. Not physically, reality itself seemed to stutter, like a skipped heartbeat in the fabric of existence. Mercer staggered, one hand slamming against a parked car as a wave of pressure crashed through his chest. The seal screamed. He doubled over, gasping as silver blue light flared briefly beneath his skin. It wasn't pain. Pain implied injury. This was recognition. "Oh no," Mercer whispered. "No, no, no." Elena turned sharply, crimson eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Mercer straightened slowly, breath coming shallow. His eyes burned with an unnatural glow as he looked toward the eastern horizon. "They've begun," he said hoarsely. Rashad stepped closer, massive frame tense. "Who has?" "The Forgotten," Mercer replied. "They're not striking cities anymore. They're hunting the hunters." Lucian stiffened. "You're sure?" Mercer nodded. "I can feel it. The seal, it recognizes them, like they're part of the same equation." Rashad's growl rumbled low. "Good. Let the hunters taste fear." "No," Mercer snapped, turning on him. "Not good. If the Forgotten wipe out the hunters entirely, there's no restraint left, no counterweight, no one slowing humanity's panic." Lucian's gaze lifted toward the sky, his expression dark. "Then governments intervene. Militaries mobilize." As if summoned by the words, the sky roared. At Fort Carson Army Base, klaxons screamed to life. Red lights flooded corridors. Soldiers poured from barracks, boots hammering pavement as armored vehicles roared awake in motor pools. Commanders barked orders into radios, their voices sharp with urgency as satellite feeds streamed into hardened command centers. "This is not a drill," a general snapped, jabbing a finger at a tactical display. "We have unidentified hostiles exhibiting non-ballistic flight, mass casualty potential, and reality distortion signatures." At Peterson Space Force Base, radar arrays lit up like a storm. "They're not aircraft," a technician said, voice cracking. "They're moving around our tracking systems, like they're stepping between pings." At Schriever Space Force Base, orbital surveillance locked onto targets rising from the Rockies, shapes tearing free of cloud cover, ascending with deliberate slowness. "Multiple contacts," an officer reported. "Altitude increasing. Heat signatures inconsistent with known propulsion." Silence fell. Then the order came down the chain. "Scramble fighters. Engage unknown hostiles." The sky over Colorado Springs ignited. Daniel Mercer felt it before he saw it. The seal beneath his skin tightened, coiling like a living thing, pulling his attention skyward with a force that made his breath catch. The air itself seemed to tense, as if the atmosphere were bracing for impact. Then the sound hit, a thunderous, tearing scream of engines at full burn. Mercer looked up just as white contrails split the clouds overhead. For F-16s screamed across the sky in tight formation, afterburners blazing like miniature suns. The shockwave rattled windows for blocks, car alarms shrieking in response as civilians pointed upward in confusion and fear. Jake Hollins stood beside Mercer, one hand shielding his eyes. "Since when do they scramble jets over downtown?" Mercer didn't answer, because the sky was already wrong. The clouds, thick, gray, rolling clouds that had hung low over the Front Range all morning, didn't part naturally. They didn't break or disperse. They tore. Reality split like fabric being pulled apart from the inside. A sound followed, low, resonant, ancient. Not thunder, not wind. A choir of stone grinding against itself. From the open wound in the sky, they rose. The Forgotten, but not the towering ground-bound forms Mercer had seen in visions or felt through the seal. These were worse. Winged shapes emerged from the clouds, their bodies elongated and angular, carved from pale stone shot through with glowing fractures of light. Their wings were vast structures of obsidian shards suspended in arcs of raw energy, bending gravity around them rather than pushing against air. They did not flap. They commanded the sky. Each movement bent the clouds, distorting space as if the air itself were a suggestion rather than a rule. "Oh God," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible beneath the roar of jets and the low hum radiating from the creatures. "They fly." The Forgotten spread out with deliberate calm, hovering above the city like judges taking their places in an execution chamber. Inside the lead jet, Captain Reese Carter's breath came fast as warning tones blared in his headset. "Command, confirm visual," he barked. "We have, Jesus Christ, multiple airborne hostiles. They don't match anything in the book." Static crackled. "Confirmed," came the response, strained but steady. "Weapons free. Engage at pilot discretion." Carter swallowed hard. Fox 2. Missiles streaked from the wings of the jets, white trails arcing toward the hovering Forgotten in brilliant, deadly lines. On the ground, Mercer felt the moment the missiles locked on. The SEAL screamed. "No," he breathed. "That won't work." The Forgotten tilted their heads in unison. Not evasively, curiously, the missiles curved. Not malfunctioned, curved. Their guidance systems twisted, trajectories bending unnaturally as if obeying a new set of laws. They detonated harmlessly in the sky, blossoming into fireballs that left the Forgotten untouched. "What they?" Carter shouted. One of the Forgotten surged forward. It didn't accelerate. It decided to be somewhere else. Passed through an F-16. Not collided. Passed through. The jet came apart midair, sliced cleanly into sections by an invisible force. The explosion came a heartbeat later, debris scattering like burning confetti across the sky. 2 parachutes bloomed. The third did not. On the ground, screams rose from the streets as flaming wreckage streaked downward. At Peterson Space Force Base, alarms blared in overlapping waves. "They're intercepting the interceptors," a radar officer shouted. "We can't get a firing solution. Our targeting keeps collapsing." At Schriever Space Force Base, satellite feeds flickered wildly. "They're climbing," an analyst yelled. "They're going vertical, altitude exceeding conventional airspace." One by one, satellites went dark. Blinded, Mercer staggered back as the SEAL pulsed violently, silver blue light crawling beneath his skin like veins of lightning. "They're not here to conquer," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Elena stood beside him, her expression tight, eyes reflecting the carnage above. "Daniel," she said quietly, urgently, "they don't see humans as innocent." Mercer's jaw clenched. "No," he said grimly, "they see humanity as the variable that broke the equation." Above them, the Forgotten spread their wings wider and descended. The first impact wasn't fire. It was weight. A Forgotten dropped into downtown Colorado Springs, landing in the middle of an intersection with a force that buckled asphalt outward in a perfect circle. Cars were lifted, twisted, and hurled aside like toys. The creature straightened slowly, its presence bending gravity around it. Light fractured across its surface, cracks glowing brighter as it turned its featureless face toward the surrounding buildings. Sirens wailed. Armored units rolled in from every direction, engines roaring as National Guard and Army units deployed in force. Tanks took up firing positions at major intersections, turrets tracking the massive figure. "Target acquired," a tank commander shouted. "Fire!" The shell hit dead center. The explosion rocked the block, fire and smoke billowing outward. Windows shattered for blocks. When the smoke cleared, the Forgotten still stood. His chest was cratered. The stone reformed, cracks sealed. The creature turned its gaze toward the tank. Gravity reversed. The 40-ton vehicle lifted off the ground, flipping end over end before slamming into a building with a scream of tearing metal. Infantry opened fire. Rounds tore through the air, 5.56.308, everything they had. The bullets passed through fractured light, leaving ripples that healed instantly. A Forgotten turned its head toward a platoon advancing down the street. The air screamed. Soldiers were ripped off their feet, hurled skyward as gravity inverted violently. Some slammed into buildings. Others vanished into the clouds, their screams cut short. "Fall back!" someone shouted. "Fall back!" Mercer sprinted into the chaos, boots pounding pavement as explosions rocked the streets around him. "Fall back!" He shouted again, his voice carrying unnaturally, amplified by something deeper. "You can't fight them like this." A captain staggered toward him, face pale, eyes wild. "Who the hell are you?" Mercer caught a collapsing Humvee with one hand, metal groaning as he held it aloft long enough for trapped soldiers to crawl free. His eyes burned with silver-blue fire. "Your only chance," Mercer said, voice steady despite the chaos, "is to evacuate civilians. Leave the Forgotten to us." The captain stared at him, then at the impossible strength on display. He swallowed hard. "Pull back," he shouted into his radio. "Evacuate. Now." Mercer turned back toward the advancing Forgotten and felt the seal twist violently. Season 2, Chapter 2, Part 2. Judgment in the Sky. Deep beneath Denver, in a chamber older than the state itself, the last surviving hunters gathered around a stone dais etched with symbols that predated language. Their faces were grim. Blood ran freely. Ancient weapons were unsealed. Blades that drank light. Firearms inscribed with sigils that burned the hands holding them. Forbidden relics pulsed weakly, awakened after centuries of disuse. Blood wards ignited, painting the chamber in crimson light. A hunter elder, her voice trembling but resolute, whispered, "We end this, or humanity burns." Hands moved in unison. They activated the balance breaker. Across the region, ley lines screamed. The earth groaned. Reality warped. Mercer screamed too. He dropped to one knee as the seal flared violently, light erupting from his skin as if trying to tear free. Lucian staggered back, clutching his chest. "They've done it," he gasped. "They've destabilized everything." Above the city, the Forgotten paused mid-flight. For the first time, they reacted. Their wings shuddered. The fractures across their bodies flared painfully bright. And then, they screamed, not in pain, in rage. The sound rolled across the sky like a death knell, shaking buildings and shattering glass. Mercer looked up, terror and understanding crashing together in his chest. "They've crossed a line," he whispered, and the world held its breath. The Forgotten did not come for cities first. They came for the lie. For centuries, the hunters had believed themselves the unseen hand, keepers of order, custodians of humanity's survival. They erased monsters from history books, buried evidence under classified files, and taught generation after generation that secrecy was salvation. They were wrong. The Forgotten remembered the moment balance was broken, and now they had come to correct it. Beneath a decommissioned Cold War bunker east of Colorado Springs, the last remnants of the Hunter Directorate convened in silence. No banners, no symbols, only steel walls, humming servers, and fear. Commander Miriam Hale stood at the center of the operations chamber, her posture rigid, her eyes hollow. She was no longer issuing commands with confidence. She was reacting. Screens lit the room, live feeds from across the state. A convoy outside Pueblo torn apart like paper. A fortified hunter archive near Cannon City collapsing inward as if swallowed by the earth. A black site chapel reduced to dust, its wards shattered in seconds. "They're not attacking randomly," an analyst whispered. "They're targeting us, our facilities, our history." Hale clenched her fists. "They're myth," she snapped. "Weapons don't do that. Not even supernatural ones." The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. A sound rolled through the bunker. Not an explosion. Not an alarm. A heartbeat. Deep, slow, ancient. Then the walls screamed. Concrete peeled outward as something stepped through reality. The Forgotten emerged. Tall, pale, featureless faces carved with glowing fractures of light. Their eyes burned like dying stars. One spoke. Not aloud. Inside their minds. "You shattered the balance. You imprisoned the wardens. You named yourselves judges." Hale reached for her sidearm. The Forgotten moved. The bunker imploded. Daniel Mercer doubled over in the street as the seal screamed inside him. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. "They've begun," he gasped. Elena turned sharply. "What?" Mercer's eyes burned silver blue. "The Forgotten aren't striking cities anymore. They're hunting the hunters." Rashad's growl rumbled low. "Good." "No," Mercer snapped. "Not good. If they wipe out the hunters entirely, there's no restraint left. No counterweight." Lucian looked skyward, expression grim. "Then humanity panics. Governments intervene. Militaries mobilize. As if summoned by his words, the sky roared. At Fort Carson Army Base, klaxons screamed. Columns of armored vehicles rolled from motor pools. Infantry units mobilized at full readiness. Commanders barked orders as satellites fed live data into hardened command rooms. "This is not a drill," a general snapped. "We have unidentified hostiles exhibiting non-ballistic flight and mass casualty potential." At Peterson Space Force Base, radar arrays screamed with anomalies. "They're not aircraft," a technician said, voice shaking. "They're moving around our tracking systems." At Schriever Space Force Base, orbital surveillance locked onto targets rising from the Rockies. "Multiple contacts," an officer reported. "Altitude increasing. Heat signatures inconsistent with known propulsion." The order came down the chain. "Scramble fighters. Engage unknown hostiles." The sky over Colorado Springs ignited. Mercer looked up as contrails split the clouds. F-16s screamed overhead, afterburners blazing. Then, the clouds tore open. They rose from the mountains like living nightmares. The flying forgotten. Winged forms of stone and light, bodies elongated and fractured. Wings formed from energy and obsidian shards. They did not flap. They commanded gravity. "They fly," Jake Hollins whispered from beside Mercer. "Oh God, they fly." The jets locked on. Fox 2. Missiles streaked toward the creatures. The forgotten tilted their heads. The missiles curved, turned, and detonated harmlessly in the sky. One forgotten surged forward, passed through an F-16. Not collided, passed through. The jet came apart midair, sliced by invisible force. Parachutes bloomed. Some didn't. At Peterson AFB, alarms blared. "They're intercepting the interceptors." At Schriever, satellites went dark. "They're climbing into near orbit." Mercer staggered back as the seal pulsed violently. "They're not here to conquer," he whispered. "They're here to erase imbalance." Elena's voice was tight. "Daniel, they don't see humans as innocent." "No," Mercer said grimly. "They see humanity as the variable that broke the equation." Armored units rolled into downtown Colorado Springs as Forgotten struck at Hunter-linked sites embedded within civilian infrastructure. Tanks fired. Shells impacted. The Forgotten did not bleed. They reformed. Infantry opened fire. Rounds passed through fractured light. A Forgotten turned its gaze on a platoon. Gravity reversed. Soldiers were hurled skyward, screaming. Mercer sprinted into the chaos. "Fall back," he shouted. "You can't fight them like this." The captain stared at him. "Who the hell are you?" Mercer caught a collapsing Humvee with one hand. "Your only chance," Mercer said, eyes glowing, "is to evacuate civilians. Leave the Forgotten to us." The captain hesitated, then nodded. "Pull back. Now." Deep beneath Denver, surviving hunters made their final play. Ancient weapons were unsealed. Forbidden relics activated. Blood wards ignited. A hunter elder whispered, "We end this, or humanity burns." They triggered the balance breaker. Across the region, ley lines screamed. Mercer screamed too. The seal flared violently. "They've done it," Lucian gasped. "They've destabilized everything." The Forgotten paused mid-flight. Then they screamed, not in pain. In rage, the Forgotten converged, not on cities, on hunter strongholds, on buried prisons, on sealed vaults holding their kin. Bunkers collapsed, prisons shattered. The earth itself rebelled. Mercer felt every release like a soul returning home. "They're freeing their own," he whispered. Elena's face was pale. "Daniel, if they finish this, there won't be a balance left to save." Above them, the largest Forgotten yet descended. Its wings blotted out the sun. Its voice echoed across the city, across minds, across history. Hunters are the architects of imbalance. Judgment is rendered. Correction begins. Mercer stepped forward. The seal burned brighter than ever before. "No," he said. The Forgotten turned. For the first time, they hesitated. Mercer raised his voice, amplified by the seal. "You were guardians," he said, "not executioners. You were meant to preserve life, not erase it." The great Forgotten studied him. "You are the lock-bearer." You are contradiction. Why should balance spare the architects of ruin? Mercer swallowed. Because if you destroy them all, he said, you become the next imbalance. Silence. Then, missiles screamed from the horizon. The military's final gambit. The Forgotten turned toward the incoming barrage, and the sky caught fire. Explosions tore the clouds apart. The Forgotten surged upward to meet the strike. Jets vanished in fire and light. Mercer collapsed to one knee, the seal blazing uncontrollably. Elena grabbed him. Daniel, hold on. Rashad howled, summoning every werewolf within miles. Lucian began a spell he had sworn never to use. And high above, as the sky burned, something ancient stirred beyond even the Forgotten. Something that had been waiting, watching, learning.